Well, it's been a packed morning already, and we're going to move right into our next segment. So next, it's my pleasure to introduce to you Rebecca Matthews. Rebecca is a clinical research executive at MAPS Public Benefit Corporation. For those who are not familiar, MAPS Public Benefit Corporation, MPBC, is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, MAPS, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. So Rebecca Matthews is a Chief Clinical Operations Officer at MPBC. She's leading the clinical operations team in conducting clinical trials around the globe in all indications and clinical programs that are supported by MAPS, PBC, and MAPS. That is a lot of clinical operations. She began consulting with MAPS in 2009 and joined MAPS PBC full-time in 2015. Prior to her work with MAPS and MAPS PBC, she worked in clinical research and development at Chiron Novartis, starting in 2001, with a focus on indications of sepsis and vaccines. She's drawn to the field of research and drug development to support advancement of healthcare and provide novel and improved treatments for the benefit of humankind. She is deeply passionate about the amazing journey and honored to be on the forefront of psychedelic medicine research. I now introduce Rebecca Matthews.
Thank you. Thank you for the lovely introduction there. As she said, I'm Rebecca Matthews, and I work for MAPS Public Benefit Corporation, and today I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are and where we want to go and where we hope to get to reach global, equitable, and bring accessible healing to all. So, as was already introduced, we are MAPS, and we're wholly owned by MAPS, the nonprofit. And we have similar mission, vision, and values. Our core values include integrity and transparency. We post publicly a lot of our study documents on our website. We'll have protocols, our investigator brochures, discussions with regulators, and we do this because we want to help and we want to share, and we are for open science, and we want to advance the field. We are curious. We're learners. We want to take in the landscape of what we're learning and what's happening and iterate on that, on our ideas and plans, and move forward in a better way. We always want to fight for what's right and continually do better to grow toward a world where we can all have healing. And one of the ways that we can do that is through research. And in this research, it's not just MAPS work, it's all of our work. Everyone in this room is a part of this. Whether you're a researcher or you're a participant or you're a rater or just a supporter or someone that talks about our work or shares our work, normalizes it with folks, gets it out there. How are people going to know this is there? We're all doing this work. The value of bringing healing to all is central for our mission for access to psychedelics and cannabis. And this community allows us to prioritize public benefit over profit maximization. We create innovative mental health treatments for those who need them most. And as this crowd knows, set and setting are important. And this work is creating the setting for the future that we all know is possible. And no other psychedelic compound today is as advanced in its research pipeline as an MDMA is. With that said, it's still research. We're still learning and studying MDMA-assisted therapy. It's not approved yet. It does not always work for everybody. And it carries risks, even when in a therapeutic setting. And to remind folks of what that therapeutic setting is, this is our basic model. There's an intake, and there's 3 hour-and-a-half non-drug introduction sessions, and then an 8-hour with 2 therapists 8-hour-long MDMA session with 3 more integration sessions after that are non-drug, an hour and a half, and that repeats about 3 times. And that's like our basic model for phase 3. Some of you may have heard about this little study that came out this year. In May of 2021, we published amazing results of our phase 3 trial that we call MAP1 in Nature Medicine. We have yet to identify another psychedelic drug development study that has achieved comparable levels of statistical significance. The outstanding success of this study builds upon the promising results in phase 2 that we conducted from 2001 to 2016. And over that time, we had 15 sites in the US, Canada, and Israel to help us gather this data. We saw no inter-site variability, and we were able to replicate our success of phase 2 in phase 3. After 3 sessions of MDMA, people in the MDMA group, 88% of participants experienced clinically significant treatment response. 88%. And thank you. Of those 88%, 67% of them no longer met criteria for diagnosis for PTSD at all. That's amazing. So we're currently doing our long-term follow-up study now to test the durability of those results. It was a huge milestone that brings us one step closer to legal medical access here. And now, we have to do it again. We are doing it again. It's our second phase 3 trial. Sorry. So we need to replicate it with our second phase 3 trial that we call MAP2. We're pushing through study enrollment through the end of the year. We hope to finish enrollment around April, and then we'll have our interim analysis that will let us know if we need to add more subjects or not. We don't expect we will, but who knows? It's research. Sometimes it throws you for a loop there. But we've passed our halfway point in enrollment already. We are excited to move forward and see what's going to happen next in this chapter here. We expect to have a full study database lock by the end of next year in the fall. So that all sounds great, but how do we expand our access and grow really big in a way that's equitable and can bring healing to all? And that's where our expanded access program is really helpful for this in the US. We hope to get real-world evidence, and how is this going to look when it goes into different communities with different therapists and new clinics, and how does it work when you set up new clinics? What kind of support are clinics going to need, are patients going to need on study after study? And we'll learn how it'll function in the future. We've been really regimented in the research we do. We have to be. But in expanded access, we can have more of a hands-off approach, and so that will give us more of an idea of what kind of support clinics will need. And patients also have more flexibility in expanded access. They can choose the timing of their treatments and the number of their treatments. So we're literally expanding access and seeing the beginning of centers of excellence. And then going even more globally, how do you expand access in that way? So we're also in talks with the Ministry of Health in Israel for an open access program there that includes a therapist training component as well. We've been speaking with Health Canada for special access programs there, and with a therapist training component, how can that look there? We're trying to figure out how we'll get this out there. We've had therapist trainees come from over 45 states and 29 countries. There are nearly 100 fully certified therapists currently. That means they've passed their supervision, and there's another 137 that are working toward that currently, and almost 1,900 trainees that have been trained but have not yet been fully certified. One barrier to equitable and global access is if we're not doing our work with diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need more diversity in our training programs. People in underserved communities need access to people from their communities for treatment. And another avenue we're taking to go global here and try to build a global community is our investigator-initiated trials program. It's a way to connect with the global psychedelic community, creating a network of researchers that I'll speak about in a little bit. And with our sponsored studies, once we finish our MAP2 study, there's still a lot more work to do to get to a point where anyone who experiences trauma can have access to MDMA-assisted therapy for healing. But we've expanded our research into Europe. We currently are seeking, we're enrolling in Europe already. We have 4 out of 5 sites already screening subjects. And so there we hope to learn, will this replicate what we saw in the US? How are there inter-site variabilities? Are there inter-country variabilities? We've already seen that in our screening process, how people identify with having PTSD or the stigma around it, or how they talk about it with clinicians and just who's in the culture there. It's a different. So what else would we maybe need to change when we go into different areas, or how do you speak about it, or do more education and outreach? So IITs. IITs are, they're a new not a new program, we've just really launched this program and really formalized it. It's a way for investigators who have a particular question and want to do research with MDMA, and they generally have funding and some backing. They can apply to us to review their proposal, and we can help investigate new modalities, or people with different experiences and different ideas, things we can't take it on. We can't do this all ourselves, and that's part of building this all together. All right, so health equity. How do we do this in a very equitable and thoughtful way? While Black Lives Matter movement has roots in police violence, this remarkable movement has put a brighter spotlight on intergenerational and racial trauma that stems from the impact of systemic racism. And the global pandemic, and COVID-19, even in our country this year, has destroyed many lives, and most disproportionately people in marginalized communities. We urgently need to build systems that enable equitable access to treatments, MDMA treatments for PTSD. The burden of PTSD is greater in marginalized communities than it is in other backgrounds. Knowing these kinds of things, we've made changes and have added therapists to our phase 3 program, therapists of color, in our network to help treat and bring more diversity to our trials and into our network of therapists. In our fall cohort, there are 154 BIPOC trainees, and we're prioritizing training and enrolling people of color. Queer and especially transgender and gender nonconforming, rural, disabled, and economically marginalized communities also continue to suffer from inadequate access to mental health care services. Those with overlapping marginalized identities experience unique hurdles to healthcare access. At MAPS and MPBC, it is our belief that everyone deserves the human right to healthcare and equal opportunity to heal from trauma and live a life without PTSD. This year, our summer and fall cohorts enrolled 254 LGBTQIA+ trainees and 40 trans and gender nonconforming trainees. We understand that currently there is inequity in this space, but now MAPS is in a position to define a unified strategic approach to health equity, to make a commitment to create new pathways to access MDMA-assisted therapy, to resist perpetuating inequities, and to build a safe and inclusive environment that ultimately fosters healing. Some of the ways we're doing this to promote health equity is understanding one of the biggest potential barriers for our ability to bring MDMA-assisted psychotherapy to the world is ensuring that we have a vast network of providers and clinics who reflect the range of people who experience trauma and can deliver culturally competent care to a broad spectrum of people. MPBC has hosted training for 55 therapists of color in 2019, and this was a collaborative event that was a step in helping us to understand how to engage and serve different communities. This cohort continues to meet regularly, and introduces new members to the group who are interested in becoming psychedelic therapists. This year's summer and fall cohorts had 288 BIPOC trainees in attendance. We've been able to fund over $300,000 of scholarships for training, as well as for conference attendance and for those who would otherwise not be able to attend, and have spoken at conferences and panels and webinars and community about the importance of health equity. For expanded access, we'll focus on subsidies for BIPOC patients who need it, and Therapists of Training Scholarship Program will prioritize therapists of color in the EA program. At work, we've embarked on ongoing DEI and inclusion workshops for our own staff. We have diversity working groups that reviews our patient-facing materials to ensure that it is appropriate across and accessible across groups. Our independent raters who assess our participants' PTSD all have gone under cultural competency training, and we have the clinicians at the site level review with the participants their past experiences with racial trauma that is passed on to the independent raters prior to their rating their PTSD. So the raters don't accidentally or mispathologize a lived experience and thinking it's something else. There's a lot more work to do, but we're listening and we're learning and we're making changes. Enrollment in our phase 3 trials is prioritizing screening participants of color as they self-identify in the screening process. And this is all preliminary data, or we're not completely enrolled yet in MAP 2, but our efforts for supporting BIPOC participants is paying off. Here are numbers between MAP 1 in the blue and MAP 2 in the purple, and they don't match up to 100 because people identify as more than one race sometimes. But overall, our efforts for supporting participants of color and enrollment now in MAP 2, we're at 51% of people who self-identify as a person of color, whereas in MAP 1, we're only 24%. So our initiatives are working, and we're really proud that we're being able to broaden that. So next steps, where else can we go? So some other options of where we think we have opportunities to learn and bring healing are anxiety disorders, eating disorders, major depressive disorder, substance use disorders, postpartum depression. There's a lot of things we can look into there. There's a lot of opportunities to bring healing to people who need it most. So I wanted to share just a brief story with you. On my way here, I'm obviously a little nervous. So I haven't flown. I'm going from San Francisco to here. I'm public speaking, and I'm feeling all kinds of ways. And my husband's driving me to the airport, and the Beatles song, Here Comes the Sun, came on, which completely calmed me, and I'll tell you why, is that it reminded me of when I was monitoring a site. And I was looking at a woman's chart, the full day. It takes a full day to monitor somebody's chart, and you sit with them, and you're in this with them. And it was a hard chart to read. And I went home, and I came back to work the next day to the clinic. But that morning, there was bright rainbow chalk outside, and underneath it said, "Here comes the sun, it's all right." And when I was being led into the building, I asked the investigator, "Oh, that's cute. Well, what's that about?" And she said, "Oh, that was the woman's chart you were reading yesterday. She had her final visit today, and she was so overjoyed. In fact, she just messaged me. She messaged me, 'I'm driving a car. I haven't driven a car in years.'" And that, to me, drives it home to me and connects it there, and why I'm doing this and why I get up and go to my desk every single day. And having that reminder.